Everyone mocked her choice. Now they begged to join her. Elin arrived at the edge of the flooded marsh with nothing but a pack, a battered canoe, and the memory of a map her grandfather once drew on a kitchen napkin. The town called it the Wastes, a land no one wanted, where water swallowed the ground and every sunset painted the sky in sickly green and gold. When she announced her plan to build a home there, laughter followed her out of the city gates. "Let her sink with the frogs," they whispered. "She'll be back by winter, if the marsh doesn't take her first." Elin ignored them. She paddled into the shallows, heart pounding, weaving through dead reeds and willows, searching for high ground. At dusk, she found it, a small rise barely above the flood, ringed by willow trees and thick with tangled roots. Here she staked her claim, driving sticks into the mud, stringing her tarp and listening as the marsh sang her to sleep. Frogs, insects, the sigh of wind through reeds. Hope and stubbornness, her only company, kept her anchored as the moon rose above her new world. Survival began with small victories. Elin scavenged planks from a derelict dock, weaving them with willow branches to form a makeshift walkway above the water. Each morning, she gathered wild rice, snails, and duckweed for food, her hands growing skilled at sorting what could be eaten from what would make her sick. The marsh fought her at every turn, swarms of mosquitoes, sudden storms, and hidden pockets of mud eager to swallow her boots. But each night she recorded her progress in a leather-bound journal. Day 5. Raised the walkway. Caught 2 fish. Lost my boots again. Day 8. Built a platform for sleeping dry. Saw the first heron. Her days fell into a rhythm: work, gather, rest, and plan. She learned the tides of the marsh, the habits of otters, the tracks of deer skirting the edges. Soon, her little rise was more than a camp. It was a foothold. Word drifted back to the town. "She's still out there," the merchants muttered, eating weeds and sleeping with the mosquitoes. Curiosity overcame a few. A fisherman, curious and half-mocking, paddled out to trade a bag of apples for stories. He returned surprised, telling of a sturdy platform rising from the water and a woman who laughed in the rain. By the end of the first month, others arrived, some curious, some desperate, all looking for advice or a place to rest. Elin welcomed them with tea brewed from marsh mint, stories of her grandfather, and lessons on how to walk the willow paths without sinking. With every visitor, her haven grew. New planks were added, platforms built higher, and fires burned through the night. Signals of life where once there was only water and wind. The marsh, once mocked, had begun to whisper its invitation to the world. The marsh revealed its secrets slowly. With the help of newcomers, Elin built raised gardens on floating platforms, rafts packed with soil, seeds, and hope. Wild rice thrived. Squash and beans climbed trellises strung from willow to willow. An old carpenter, banished from town for debts, taught everyone how to lash planks together so storms wouldn't tear their work apart. A former nurse planted herbs for medicine: marshmallow root, skullcap, feverfew. Her knowledge as precious as any tool. Each night, the fire circle grew wider, more voices joining in song and story. Children, once afraid of the deep water, learned to swim and fish, fearless in their new home. No longer just a camp, Elin's haven became a village. Floats and platforms clustered like lily pads, lights glowing on the water. From the city, the marsh looked unchanged, but life now moved beneath the willows. Challenge followed growth. A storm struck with a fury none had seen before. Winds toppled platforms, rain flooded tents, and the river rose, threatening to swallow their fragile foothold. For 3 days, they fought to save what they'd built. Lashing platforms, bailing boats, and rescuing floating gardens with lines tied to trees. Elin's voice rose above the chaos, organizing crews, comforting children, and urging everyone to hold fast. In the darkness, she worked shoulder to shoulder with neighbors who had once laughed at her, now desperate to save the only home they had left. When the waters finally receded, the damage was heavy, but the spirit of the village was stronger than ever. They rebuilt, higher, wiser, together. News of the storm's survival reached far and wide. People who had mocked Elin now lined the docks in the city, hoping for a place in the marsh. Some brought nothing but empty hands and hunger. Others carried tools, seeds, or a skill to offer. Elin welcomed them all, but set clear rules. Everyone must work, share, and respect the land. Arguments were settled around the fire, and decisions made by the circle. Every voice counted. The haven grew again, More platforms, more gardens, a school on a floating barge where children learned both letters and the ways of the marsh. Her journal, once a private record of struggle, became a manual for newcomers. How to build, how to grow, how to listen to the land. Where once there was laughter at her expense, now there was only gratitude, and a long waiting list for a spot on the water. With growth came complexity. Food was now abundant. Floating gardens yielded baskets of vegetables, nets brought in fish, and duck eggs filled their larders. The nurse organized a clinic, treating bites, fevers, and the homesickness that sometimes swept the new arrivals. But new problems emerged: jealousies over the best platforms, debates over how to expand, and old prejudices from the city creeping into conversations around the fire. Elin and the council responded by insisting on open discussion. Weekly meetings saw heated arguments, but always ended with hands joined, voices lifted in agreement. The marsh belonged to all who called it home. A festival was declared for the marsh's first anniversary. Drums, laughter, and floating lanterns marked the night. No one in the city could remember such joy. Adversity returned, this time in the form of pollution. A leaking barrel from upstream poisoned the water, sickening fish and making gardens wilt. Elin acted quickly. She called on the nurse, the biologist, and even old city contacts for help. Together, they constructed filters from charcoal, sand, and woven reeds, diverting clean water into the heart of the village. The crisis drew everyone closer. People volunteered for long shifts tending filters and hauling clean water. Musicians played to lift spirits, and the children painted bright flags to warn of danger zones. In time, the marsh healed. Wildlife returned, and the gardens flourished again. Through hardship, the haven grew ever more resilient. Word of the marsh's recovery spread to distant towns. Delegations arrived, hoping to learn, to trade, or simply to find a new beginning. Elin greeted each group personally, sharing her journal and inviting them to join in the work. Floating workshops were built. One taught weaving reeds into baskets and mats. Another experimented with breeding salt-tolerant crops. A third was a music hall where every instrument was handmade. Children from the marsh and visitors alike ran wild over the planks and through the willow groves. The haven was now more than a refuge. It was a place where people came to remember how to build, heal, and hope. Peace in the marsh drew new eyes, some friendly, some not. A group of landowners from the city arrived, claiming the marsh as their property and demanding taxes. They brought lawyers and threats, waving papers as if words alone could tear up willow roots. Elin stood with the council and the village behind her. She presented her journal, maps of the work they'd done, and a statement signed by every resident. This land is ours by labor, by care, by community. Negotiations were tense, with the city officials promising trouble. But Elin stood firm, refusing to surrender the marsh to anyone who hadn't lifted a single plank. With the support of her people and the truth of their work, the officials left, grumbling but powerless. The village flourished as never before. Artists painted murals on every platform, telling the story of Elin's first days, the great storm, and the rebirth of the marsh. A school for all ages expanded, floating classrooms filled with laughter, learning, and the sound of music drifting over the water. The annual festival became a destination for travelers. Markets bustled with trade, and musicians from across the region came to play under lantern-lit skies. Elders told stories of how the city once scoffed at the marsh, now its most prized neighbor. The haven's spirit was simple. No one was turned away for lack of money or a difficult past. Here, everyone was welcome if they worked with their hands and shared with their heart. Elin grew older, her hair silvered by sun and time. She became the village's anchor, guiding disputes, mentoring leaders, and reminding everyone of the marsh's lessons: patience, resilience, and listening to the land. One autumn, a fire broke out in a distant corner, threatening platforms and gardens. The village responded as one, forming bucket lines, singing work songs, and rebuilding stronger than before. After the fire, Elin proposed a new tradition. Each year, a new patch of marsh would be restored, planted, and celebrated by all. The marsh, once mocked and feared, was now a living mosaic, proof that stubborn hope and shared work could turn water and mud into a home. The marsh's reputation spread across the land. Journalists, scholars, and leaders from far-off places visited to study Elin's haven. They marveled at floating gardens, intricate water filtration, and the harmony between human and wild. Elin insisted that every visitor spend time working, planting, hauling, building, before being allowed to write or speak about the marsh. This tradition bred respect and curiosity in equal measure. With so many hands, the village expanded. Floating bridges connected distant islets, new workshops sprang up, and a market for rare marsh medicines attracted traders from distant regions. The haven became a center for innovation, where anyone could test an idea so long as they shared what they learned. But not all visitors came as friends. One spring, a sickness arrived with a merchant's boat. Fever spread quickly, threatening to undo everything they had built. The nurse and her students worked tirelessly, isolating the sick, brewing herbal remedies, and teaching everyone to boil water and wash hands. Elin led by example, caring for the ill, calming fears, and ensuring no one was left alone. Many fell sick, but few were lost. The marsh's traditions, community, care, and resilience proved their strength once more. Afterward, a day of remembrance was declared, and the village council codified new rules to protect health for generations to come. Elin's legacy became legend. Children grew up never knowing a world without the marsh's haven. They learned to build, to plant, to listen to the wind and the water's warnings. Each season, the annual restoration brought old and young together, planting new groves of willow and building platforms further into the once forgotten wetlands. Elin's journal, once private, became a treasured text, copied, shared, and adapted by new settlements rising in marshes elsewhere. On her walks through the haven, Elin watched with pride as a new generation led the village, organizing markets, settling disputes, and dreaming even bigger than she had. Her once mocked choice had become the heartbeat of a new world. Decades passed, and the marsh was unrecognizable from the place Elin first found. A living city floated upon green water, platforms stacked with gardens, homes nestled between willow trunks, windmills spinning in the breeze. Every plank, every raft, every path built by hundreds of hands. The annual festival now drew thousands. Travelers arrived by canoe, barge, and on foot, marveling at the lantern-lit waterways and feasting on food that grew from water and mud. Elin, now revered as founder and elder, was slower, her hair long and silver, but her mind still sharp. She guided the council, gave speeches at festivals, and welcomed newcomers with the same warmth that built the village from nothing. One year, a terrible drought struck the lands beyond the marsh. Crops failed, and cities pleaded for help. The marsh answered. Boats full of rice, herbs, and fish left daily, guided by Elin's students, feeding thousands and teaching new villages to build their own havens on water. For the first time, the world outside admitted the marsh was not just a curiosity, but a hope for survival. Elin spent her last years writing, filling journals with the stories, lessons, and failures that shaped the marsh's soul. The city had become a patchwork of voices and cultures, united by the land and the water. Children learned to read and write by copying Elin's words. Elders taught psalms and stories in the schoolboat on the main canal. The council grew ever more diverse, its leaders chosen by work, trust, and kindness. As her strength waned, Elin wandered the walkways at dawn, pausing to admire new gardens, new faces, and the old friends who still called her founder. On her final salt day, thousands gathered on the main plaza, platforms strung together, music ringing, boats glowing with colored lanterns. Elin took the stage for one last speech. This haven was built on stubborn hope. Let it be a promise to every place still waiting for rebirth. She passed that night, the marsh singing her to sleep. Elin's memory was etched into every willow, every raft, every child's song. A statue in her likeness, carved from driftwood, stood at the village's entrance. Her journals were preserved in the floating library, read by students and dreamers from across the world. The marsh became a model for restoration everywhere. Abandoned wetlands were claimed and rebuilt by communities inspired by Elin's story. Places of healing, hope, and home. Each year, the village restored a new patch of wild, planting, cleaning, and celebrating as Elin taught. No one mocked the marsh anymore. Now they begged to join its living heart.